Hi there, everybody. My name is Dr. Sally Cawood. I'm based in the Urban Studies and Planning Department at the University of Sheffield. Welcome to the sessions and welcome to this track in FSM 6. Today, I'll be talking about my research on sanitation workers and especially those involved in manual emptying or manual pit emptying in Bangladesh. This is based on ongoing research I've been doing with WaterAid India and WaterAid Bangladesh over the last couple of years. And I'd like to just give a shout out to colleagues Melisha Farzana, Faisal Naeem, and to WaterAid Bangladesh, especially for their support in supporting this research. So I'll be talking today about minorities and whether they're losing out in the improved sanitation work. And I'll explain a bit about what I mean with that in the coming slides. So as we know, sanitation workers, and especially those involved in hazardous manual emptying or manual scavenging, have been at the front line in COVID-19. And we know a bit more about these workers now from ongoing advocacy, especially from the World Bank and WaterAid, WHO and ILO, as well as SNV, in coming with their seminal report in 2019 on sanitation workers. But sadly, in Bangladesh and across South Asia, manual scavenging, which is the most hazardous form of sanitation work, does persist, and in many ways as a form of caste-based slavery, as the IDSN would say. In Bangladesh, we're only now starting to understand a bit more about how these workers are living and how their livelihoods are affected by this type of work. So just as you can see here in the slide, there's a particular community in Bangladesh involved in this type of work, and they self-define themselves as Harijan, meaning children of God in the Gandhian term. And these are low-caste Hindu workers initially brought over during the British colonial era to do nongrakaj, which means dirty work. So they've been involved in this type of work for many years, and they are still involved in this type of work today. And as I've mentioned here in the slide, many of these workers and communities actually fear displacement from these traditional roles, even though they're extremely degrading and hazardous. And they fear the mechanization in the sanitation sector through mechanization with trucks in fecal sludge management. And some of the previous work that a colleague of mine, Mariam Zakot, and we have done is looking at some of these challenges facing these workers in terms of accessing the improved jobs and also accessing alternative livelihood options. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, this gentleman we came across in our fieldwork pre-COVID, I have to say, last year. And as you can see here, he's got a bucket and a rope, and that's what he uses to empty the septic tanks in this rural municipality. And this other image, on the other hand, is of a more modernized system, and this is the mechanized version, where we're looking at using trucks like the VacuTag to empty these septic tanks, sewers and drains and pit latrines, and then dumping the waste in the fecal sludge treatment plant or co-composting plant, as you can see here. So that's that switch I'm talking about, from the manual to the mechanical. And this research, as I say, in collaboration with WaterAid, as well as activists and other organisations in India and Bangladesh, has been trying to understand how minority groups especially, so low caste, ethnic and religious minorities, such as Harijan emptiers, whether they're actually able to access those improvements brought about by mechanisation or enter alternative livelihood options outside of the sanitation sector. And if not, why not? And I'm sure many of you today will be thinking there's some obvious reasons there around caste, around discrimination, and that whole history of discrimination that many workers face. But as I'll show, there's a few different things coming out from this research, which is also important to look at. And then also to look at the potential pathways out of hazardous manual emptying work and how NGOs, government agencies and workers can actually support that process through policy, planning and practice. And as we're in a stream today looking at equity and inclusion, how can we make these policies more equitable to include these types of workers going forward? So just a quick note on fieldwork. As I say, this happened just before COVID really kicked in 2020. And I won't go into this in much detail, but please do email me if you have any questions on this. But just to note, it was a qualitative study. This is qualitative research to understand the lives and the lived experiences and livelihoods of these types of workers. We also did some key informant interviews with labour rights organisations, WASH and Dalit rights organisations to understand the different dynamics around this work. And then we visited 4 case study areas with WaterAid Bangladesh and local partners to look at how workers are operating these areas, the challenges that they face, and especially doing focus groups with men and women to understand some of the familial family dynamics and community-wide dynamics facing these workers, as well as some more in-depth interviews with community leaders around their history around British colonialism to today, and they're very much aware of that history. So coming to some of the gaps in the knowledge and what some of the key questions we were looking at, just taking up first one. And here's some quotes integrated in the slides here, and some key points, key findings that we came across. And so what's clear is that broader unemployment trends and competition for jobs, meaning that actually other people and other socioeconomic, religious and ethnic groups are now entering sanitation work, often when it's in its improved form, and that means on the trucks or in an improved fecal sludge treatment plant, but also into the manual emptying as well. So this is quite important to note that new groups are coming in, both in the improved work and in some cases into the hazardous work, simply because they need to earn in a very competitive job market. The Harijan emptiers often reported that they're unable to access the improved work and the alternative livelihood options due to that stigma and discrimination, as I mentioned, linked to their identity, their occupation, and also where they live, which also has great stigma attached to it, because these are, again, colonial era colonies, as they're known, and they often lack basic facilities there themselves. But also we noted issues around bribery and subcontracting. So often having to pay quite a large amount of money to get access to a job in the first place. And when you do get a job, you might also have subcontracted work, which is basically someone who has a formal job subcontracting the dirty work to you for a fraction of the price. And that might be clearing up feces, as well as clearing dead animals or sick or anything like that in the community or the local area. And so you can see here, younger generations deployed a range of strategies to avoid any association with this type of work, and also to seek alternative options. And some of these strategies were quite extreme in the sense it might be migrating to large cities, hiding your name, your identity, your address, or even converting to another religion to try and escape the stigma. But even then, this does come to kind of catch you again, even if you have an education. If someone finds out where you live or your name, then that can often mean you end up again in this type of work. Not necessarily the emptying work, but certainly road sweeping or solid waste cleaning, solid waste collection. So these are very significant challenges facing these communities at the moment. And one thing that's clear, especially talking to the Dalit and labour rights organisations as well, is that in the wash sector, we often talk about public health and we often talk about improving sanitation for all. But we can see that without doubt, the introduction of trucks, even though wholly positive, also has some unintended or negative consequences for workers that rely on manual types of labour, even though it's extremely degrading and dangerous. And some actually equated the loss of earnings with this shift to starvation and actually not having enough money to buy books to eat. So there's some very real quotes coming from the fieldwork in terms of that switch between the manual to mechanical and lack of access to the improved job opportunities. Another key issue that came out was that training, even if workers are trained to actually access these improved jobs, it might just be one-off with a lot of frustration that there's no follow-up or there's just no funding available for permanent job creation. So many workers that, again, perhaps enter under the radar into this type of manual emptying, even though they might have been trained to exit that kind of work. Okay, so turning in a more kind of positive tone now, just to look at some of the pathways, potential pathways out of this type of work. So kind of on the switch side here, we do have some significant work among NGOs, especially in Bangladesh, and the government and the Faecal Sludge Management Network, who are trying to improve working practices through the use of personal protective equipment, as well as lobbying for healthcare insurance and a range of other work benefits. And that has been having a really positive effect. That, as well as the changing terminology around this kind of work. So rather than being known as a sweeper, you might be now known as a cleaning worker or a porachorno kormi, And that gives some of the workers a better sense of dignity for the work they're doing. And also, increasingly, they're known as workers first and foremost, which means they might be able to organise to lobby for improved working conditions. There are some jobs on the trucks and the FSTPs that are allocated to Harajan workers, especially in a kind of affirmative action sense. And some of the workers also noted the opportunity linked to jobs for these kinds of facilities. And as mentioned here, education and training and startup grants are also a potential opportunity to help workers enter into these different livelihood options to make sure that they can try and escape the stigma around doing sanitation work, to try and enter into different types of livelihoods. And there was a great demand for that as well. I'm just going to check on the timing. Okay, I think just to wrap up now, so some opportunities that came out from the work. Some strategic alliances are key between the WASH sector, the labour and Dalit rights sectors, to look more holistically at sanitation labour, not only looking at that improvement in public health for the workers and society, but also thinking about livelihoods, thinking about organising workers, and thinking about discrimination and how maybe tackling some of these broader issues might also improve workers' well-being. And one demand from the community was around the Anti-Discrimination Act and trying to push for that in Bangladesh. As I say here, inclusive planning with FSM, including, for example, transition plans, where you might look at how to support workers in that switch from manual to mechanical, to support them through training and skill development, and also to think about alternative livelihood options. There's a clear demand to lobby the government for more permanent job creation in FSM and also in solid waste sectors, and also to have those work benefits as many workers demand. And just to note here as well, finally, that there's also a great demand among young people, especially in these communities, to organise and also to improve access improved alternative options. So if we can support these communities in that sense, training, and especially with youth empowerment, would be a really key way in which to support these workers going forward. So I will end it there, and thank you everybody for your attention. There's a few resources here, and if you would like to get in touch, then please reach out and it'd be great to talk to you in more detail. Thanks very much.
The Global Sanitation Graduate School is the world's largest platform for capacity building in citywide inclusive sanitation. We offer educational programs in sanitation with a focus on participants from low and middle income countries. We are expanding rapidly and welcome new members. Interested? Contact us today, www.sanitationeducation.org.
Hello, FSM 6 fellow participants. My name is Beatrice Chiwala Chibwe. I'm the gender coordinator for Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company. My presentation today is on designing and planning for inclusive on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management of products and services, a case of Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company. The outline of my presentation, I'll give a brief background. I'll go to introduction and share the approaches we are using, the results and the lessons we have learned, and I'll end with a conclusion. That is Zambia, the map of Zambia, and Lusaka province is right at the bottom there, where the capital city of Lusaka is. Lusaka has a population of almost 3 million people with a growth rate of 4.8 per annum. 70% of the Lusaka population reside in informal settlements dotted around the city. These informal settlements are characterized by high population density, haphazard layout of houses, and I'll say that the sanitation in these areas is poor. Lusaka Water has over the years implemented water and sanitation projects in these areas, and in 2018, the mandate for the company was expanded to include on-site sanitation so that the peri-urban areas where 70% of the population resides can have access to improved sanitation services and fecal sludge management projects. And we are in that aspect, we are trying to be more inclusive as a company in the way we are providing the services, and especially to meet the needs of women, girls, and other vulnerable groups. And for that, we are using an approach we have coined social inclusion and gender mainstreaming, in short, SIGIM, which we are using, and it was approved in 2018. The approaches to this one is we are aiming at addressing the very root cause of gender equality and social inclusion challenges that manifest in the designing, planning, framework, and policies for sanitation, thereby impacting on operations and service delivery. So we are the social inclusion and gender mainstreaming SIGIM. We are going to the very root that poses barriers to especially women and girls to accessing improved sanitation services at household level. So in that approach, the first thing we are doing is to revise company policies, processes, and procedures to accommodate gender and social inclusion accountabilities. Because of the change of the mandate, our policies never accommodated before. They never accommodated the gender and social inclusion. So we are aiming to change our policies and improve on it. I'll go over that again. So like I said, we are working towards reviewing company policies, processes, and procedures to accommodate gender and social inclusion accountabilities. And also the other thing we are doing is to build capacity among the employees to ensure they are able to identify gender and social inclusion issues in their areas of operation. Because previously we never used to concentrate on on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. So the members of staff that are already employed need their capacity to be improved so that they can execute their duties well. The other one we are doing is to revise job descriptions so that we include gender and social inclusion key performance indicators. And the other one we are doing is to conduct research in social inclusion and gender mainstreaming and fecal sludge management so that the members of staff who are working can make informed decisions when they encounter these things on the ground. Lusaka Water, so far, because we are addressing to review company processes and procedures, we started with reviewing our gender policy, which was approved in 2018. And we have an accompanying strategy for 5 years going up to 2022. The framework there is going to help us monitor what we are doing and the progress we are making. And we have trained members of staff and the community to help us mainstream issues of gender at household level. And we have also embarked on reviewing job descriptions for members of staff, and with that process is almost concluding with approvals for each member of staff to sign for their key performance indicators. And there is commitment at higher level, because for social inclusion and gender to achieve the desired results, we need the political will. And at the institutional level, at the highest level, at managing director level, there is commitment to ensure that whatever projects we are doing, we accommodate gender and social inclusion. And there, the pictures below show a toilet that has a ramp for the disabled people. The other one is to assist the elderly, because it has somewhere where to hold, and also for women who are expecting. And I'll go down there that Lusaka Water is the only institution in Zambia that has established and appointed a full gender coordinator person who reports direct to the Director of Human Resources and Administration. The other CUs in Zambia, commercial utilities, they have a focal point person, but for me, my job is full-time social inclusion and gender mainstreaming. I'm responsible for the day-to-day running and ensuring that the company mainstreams issues of gender and social inclusion. What are the lessons that we have learned? The key lesson we have learned is that gender stereotypes still pose a greater challenge and risk to improving on-site sanitation and faecal sludge services at household level. What we've come to discover is that in spite of the company having good policies, gender, social inclusion and gender still are a big issue at household level. Whoever has the power and the resources will invest in sanitation. So if someone does not have power at the household level, who are the most affected are women. They cannot change decisions or influence the decision. The man will say, I'll pay for the toilet later, or I'll construct it later. Because the women mostly at the household level, they don't have the power and the resources to change the status quo. The other lesson we have learned is that for on-site sanitation and faecal sludge management to work at household level, we need an integrated approach that will empower women, girls, and other vulnerable groups with income, education, land tenure, to enable them have a voice to change the status quo. Confidence is such empowerment to ensure that toilet facilities which are constructed at household level meet their needs. So it's not a matter of just having a toilet, but it should be able to address the needs of the members of the household. And we are saying that this will enhance sense of ownership. People will have a voice, they'll speak out and be able to voice out their needs at any forum. My conclusion is that conducting a thorough gender and social assessment is critical to FSM and on-site sanitation service delivery. I'll go over that again. Conducting a thorough gender and social assessment across the entire OSS and faecal sludge service chain is critical to successful implementation and sustainability. Every project that is supposed to be done should make sure it speaks to the gender and social needs of the household people, the members of the household at that family. Then the systems and resources should be put in place to identify and address gender and social inclusion at household level, because that is where decisions are made. They are not supposed to be done in abstract or at the institutional level, but the households should be made to identify these issues on their own and address them. Then participation of beneficiaries, including women, girls, and other vulnerable groups, is critical if, especially Zambia, we have to achieve the universal access for all. Like our national development plan says, we are not supposed to leave anyone behind. And mostly the people that are behind trading are women, girls, and other vulnerable groups like the aged, the people with disabilities. So our infrastructure should make sure they accommodate the needs of these people from the start of the project to the end. And their needs vary because of the nature of their resources and power. And systems should be put in place to ensure this is addressed. Those are my references for the presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Cinderella Eco Group is dedicated to provide safe sanitation and water conservation in Kenya. The Cinderella incineration toilet is water-free and burns all waste. No sludge management, no after-handling. The only outcome is sterile ash, free of all pathogens, sustainable.
Hi, I'm Abhinav. I'm from KPMG in India, and I want to talk today about how we have enabled an inclusive urban wash ecosystem in India, partnering with the Government of India and our development partners, United States Agency for International Development and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. As some of you might know, before 2014, there wasn't really an urban sanitation program in India. But in 2014, our Prime Minister gave us this target that by the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth, which was 2019, we wanted to create what he mentioned was a Swachh India or a clean India. The objectives of this mission was to eradicate open defecation in the urban areas and 100% scientific waste management in urban India. What this program really did and how it was different from a lot of programs which had taken place in India before was that this was really focused on creating a people's movement on the ground. And time and again, various studies and surveys have shown that this is one of the most popular, one of the most well-known programs of the government, and people have really owned it. And therefore, the impact which it has created today is for everyone to see. Urban India is today open defecation free, and it's not just a claim which the government makes, it is something which is certified by independent third-party processes. The percentage of waste management has more than tripled since 2014, and admittedly, here we have not reached our target of 100%. But at the same time, recognizing that ending open defecation is only the first of many goals towards fully safe sanitation coverage in India, the government has launched phase 2 of the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban in this year, and which will run for 5 more years, focusing on fully safely managed sanitation for all of urban India. Let's talk about why inclusion matters. People would say it's SDG 6 that we are targeting. Why do we talk about SDG 5 on gender equality or SDG 10 on reduced inequalities? Because the SDGs have a principle of leaving no one behind. As most of us being practitioners in this space would know, women, transgenders, differently abled, sanitation workers, children, and most importantly, the urban poor bear an inequitable amount of burden of the effects of poor sanitation. And therefore, what was done in Swachh Bharat Mission, that inclusive policies were created with special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situations. Employment was made inclusive, equality and non-discrimination in all aspects of sanitation work. And I'll talk about a few case studies where women, transgenders, and other vulnerable populations such as rag pickers or informal sector sanitation workers have really taken the lead. And creating inclusive accessibility. Under the mission guidelines, all infrastructure which had to be created had to be adequately and equitably accessible to everybody in the society. The principle that was broadly followed, and this is more so getting adopted as we talk, is the citywide inclusive sanitation framework, which is a public service approach to planning and implementing urban sanitation systems to achieve SDG 6 outcomes. It works on 4 basic pillars: access to all, as I spoke earlier, service sanitation chain. It looks towards addressing the complexities of the entire sanitation value chain rather than delivering a fixed solution to everybody. Working in partnerships with local communities, local governments, and service providers, and then obviously leading to a thriving economy which serves everyone. One of the unique approaches that was adopted in the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, and we as KPMG are proud to have been part of the conceptualization phase and obviously it's scaling up, was a competitive monitoring framework called Swachh Survekshan. Now, this was a framework which was designed to assess sanitation and waste management linked parameters and was essentially about ranking cities on various parameters linked to the mission. What it has evolved into is an implementation accelerator. What it has done is created that spirit of healthy competition. It has also driven outcomes for which no funding was available under the mission, which is something which is a unique finding. This started in 2015 when KPMG helped the government of India develop and roll out a pilot of the Swachh Survekshan. This pilot was done towards the later part of the year. The first such survey in 2016 was targeted at 73 cities in India, which had population over 1 million. In this first survey, honestly, we were a bit disappointed because the uptake, the excitement of the cities was not what we were expecting it to be. This survey also focused on physical progress. The city of Mysuru in southern India was adjudged to be the top ranked city. But when the awards were given out and our minister, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, who now happens to be the vice president of the country, gave out these awards. He gave a call to all the cities that let's see which city comes out on top next year. He gave a challenge to cities such as Dharbar, Indore, Bhopal, who are pretty much at the bottom of the pile in the first survey, to come out on top next year. And boy, did they perform. In the next survey, which was in 2017, it was done for 434 cities, which had a population over 1 lakh or 100,000. This survey was focused on outcomes rather than physical progress. This was for the first time that gender and inclusion indicators were introduced, such as that all your public toilets have both male and female access. Do they have disabled access? Do you have women-friendly entrances such as light, bolts on toilets, etc.? In this survey, Indore, which was placed very low in the first survey, came out on top. Bhopal, which was placed very low, came second. And there was palpable excitement in the air. With time, it has expanded to include all urban local bodies of India, about 4,200 odd. When we moved from outcome to sustainability in 2018, to institutionalization in 2019, and last year, 2020, we focused on integrated approach. In 2020, we also introduced a concept called as Swachh Sarvekshan League, because we wanted cities to perform throughout the year and not just in January when the Sarvekshan happened. We saw an incredible amount of mobilization in our cities, an incredible amount of hard work, not just by the municipal staff, but by the people, and most of all, the sanitation workers, or Swachhagrahis, as we call them in India now. The word Swachhagrahi has a special meaning. For some of you who know the history of India, you will know that our freedom fighters were called Satyagrahis, or what it means is called warriors of truth. The term Swachhagrahi means the warriors for cleanliness. And that's how important cleanliness is to our country. Mahatma Gandhi had said, cleanliness is more important than freedom. And our people across all the cities of this country have taken this to heart. I do understand the skepticism that a lot of the development community has on the outcomes. Yes, the outcomes do not necessarily reflect what the government claims, but each and every person living in the cities of India has adopted this program. And we will see the results specifically in terms of inclusion, specifically in terms of gender equality. One instance which I want to quote, when the COVID lockdown was imposed in India in the 4th week of March, in Punjab, in a small town called Moga, the sanitation workers went door to door collecting waste from contained households where it was treated as biomedical waste. And the people came to their terraces and showered them with flowers because they were the frontline workers who were working to keep them safe. Let's see what were the indicators that were there in Swachh Sarvekshan, and these have evolved with time. The first and most importantly, we realized was how do we promote workplace safety for sanitation workers? As some of you might have heard, there were far too many deaths. Even one death is a far too many, but far too many deaths from sanitation workers not being given protective equipment, not being trained adequately. We put in an indicator of the provision of personal protective equipment for sanitation workers, and within 1 year, the coverage went up from 11% to 83%. The program also banned the manual entry inside sewer lines without safety gear. And per media reports, this came down drastically. It's not zero, which is still a matter of concern, but it did come down significantly. A lot of the people who were engaged in this sector were informal rag pickers who would work in the landfills, who would work in unsafe areas. We worked to give them social security net. There were various government programs to whom they were linked. They were given housing, they were given gas connections at home, they were given financial protection, they were given identity cards. So they got an acceptance as a formal service provider in the urban areas. We worked on employment generation and capacity building in convergence with the National Urban Livelihood Mission. We targeted the sanitation workers for training of desludging operators on safety protocols. There was a framework for convergence created between the Urban Livelihoods Mission, which resulted in strengthening of community engagement models for sanitation-related work. We promoted gender inclusion in Swachh Sarvekshan. We defined what did inclusion meant, how many toilet seats per women, maintenance of toilet by women self-help groups, gender-responsive sanitation guidelines, the first time in India, assessment of community and public toilets on safety and accessibility, and most importantly, the concept of pink toilets were introduced, which were exclusive toilets for women and transgenders. The impact in this regard is to be seen. There are about 500,000 sanitation workers which have been linked to government social protection programs, over 400,000 contractual sanitation workers integrated into the formal workforce, over 700,000 sanitation workers equipped with personal protective equipment, special toilets for women and transgender constructed in more than 1,600 cities, and provision of health and life insurance to more than 150,000 sanitation workers. There are some case studies which are here, and we will provide this presentation to all the attendees. But there is one case study which I really want to speak about is Swachh Ambikapur, where the small town in the backward state of Chhattisgarh, ostensibly a backward state, where an army of 9,000 women self-help group members managed end-to-end the solid and liquid waste of the city. This city is one of the forerunners in getting all the outcomes of the Swachh Bharat mission. It won the cleanest small city title in Swachh Sarvekhan 2020. It is certified as a 5-star garbage-free city for holistic waste management practices. And through various processes, they have earned an income of about $69 per month, which for those areas is significant. Their average income per month was less than $10. And they are getting this income through the sale of recyclables. And the service levels is much better than what some formal companies are providing in the larger cities. While the other case studies, this case study is something which I want to highlight because all these women who were employed in the self-help groups, most of them were destitutes, living in the landfill areas, did not have any training, did not have any social protection, and the Swachh Bharat mission has managed to get them into the mainstream. That is something which we are very, very proud of. And therefore, what do we want to do in the next phase? We want to scale up community-based wash planning approaches. We want to institutionalize gender sensitization in policy making. We want to institutionalize gender-responsive budgeting and providing agency to women. We want to institutionalize structures to advance inclusive sanitation, create platforms to target community-level wash outcomes, and promote gender-inclusive behavior change. We believe with all of us working together, this will happen in India in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Meet Amalulu. 33 years of research and development have put us at the forefront of resolving the global sanitation crisis by providing a sustainable and affordable sanitation solution, which is both safe to use and easy to maintain. Amalulu, building healthy nations.
Thank you so much, Andre. This is Dr. Seydina Sene, and I'm a wash policy and financial analyst expert working in Senegal. And this presentation I'll be going to share with you guys is an assessment of exposure to fecal contamination in Dakar, Senegal. And then we use this methodology using the Sanipath tool developed by the Emory University team in collaboration with us. And then it was the first time that we experimented that in Senegal. And the result that we got over a year of studying fecal contamination in Dakar and peri-urban Dakar is going to be shared throughout the presentations. The collaboration that we had over this study was tremendous in a sense that, you know, in Senegal, you couldn't conduct this type of study without having the approval of the government bodies, which is the Minister of Health and Sanitation, who is in charge of really delivering research conduct guideline to be able to really undertake this type of study that involves children's, both women and then men's, on Dakar and peri-urban Dakar. So we collaborate with Trend, which is like, you know, one of the also implementation partners in Ghana, Emory University in Atlanta, the University of Dakar, Speak Up Africa, And I must say that this project is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations in support of really enhancing policy, enabling environment for the study of value chain. This sheet flow diagram really looking into how much effort is made in really containing fecal sludge to be managed adequately in Dakar. This sheet flow diagram shows in the recent studies conducted by SP is only being managed safely in Dakar, and 69% of this fecal sludge does not arrive at this treatment station in Dakar, which really pose the question of where does it go if it doesn't come to the treatment stations? Where does the 61%, 69% goes? That prompts us to really think of ways of not only tracking that, but really seeing the impact of unsafe managed sanitation. How does it affect also household, private sectors, but also government budget in terms of health expenditure, and really trying to push the agenda of making sure that the government prioritize investment in really supporting on-site sanitations, non-sewer sanitation versus really among the stakeholders. Before we conduct this study, we had to do what we call stakeholder engagement. And the stakeholder engagement allowed us in the municipality or communities that we work on to be able to really have the buy-in of the communities, policymakers, private sector, and women organization. And among them, we have actually obtained clearance to conduct the study by the Minister of Water and Sanitation to really make sure that we are aligned with the ethic committee's guideline in terms of conducting this type of studies. The second step was we selected a community engagement stakeholders consultation process where we really have the buy-in of the community leaders, custom leaders, and municipality on board. And the other one was really, we held actually a workshop to train both participants on the SaniPath tools to be able to carry out the studies correctly in Dakar. And then the other one was we have actually staff, 20 staff that comes also from the university, from the Institute Pastors, and then also from the SaniPath teams in Ghana. The other thing that we have also after this training was these are the institutions that are involved in the studies. That was the Minister of Water and Sanitation, Delvic International, who is in charge of really handling all the treatment facility management in Dakar. We have the support of owners, Institute Pasteur, who is now handling all the microbiology tests. And then we have also the women groups in each municipality who are actually trained within their own municipality and localities to be able to conduct the studies. We have the support of Oxfam, Sen Engineering, the CRES, which is another research institution in Speak of Africa. So as you can see, the stakeholder engagement is comprised of both civil society, research institutions, government entities, and then the private sector. So these pictures demonstrate how many people were engaged for each community and each municipalities around the studies. The pictures at the bottom left here show that the training that we conducted for each participant that were involved in the certificate, the mayor of the city and communities. The bottom here on the right, you can see now the first stakeholder engagement that we have conducted at IPOR, where we really show and demonstrate the importance of conducting rapid fecal sludge assessment of fecal contamination in Dakar. And then the bottom of the top right here shows actually the meeting we held within each community to get to introduce the SaniPath methodology, but also contextualize the tools and methods to the reality of the context and the local municipalities. Where we conducted the studies are mainly based in 5 communities, which is in urban and peri-urban areas of Dakar. It's like the highlight here is Wakina Minza, Jide Chaoikau, Rifus S, Sikap Liberté, and then these are the communities that are actually in the heart of Dakar, the blue one, and then the other one are in peri-urban Dakar, which is in the suburb. This map shows actually how we were able to contain the participant and population that were interviewed and selected for the studies. Our teams had each one of them a GPS, and in Dakar, urban areas, the limitation of the neighborhood is very complex because between two municipalities, they don't have clear boundaries. So what we do is, like, because we conducted a community engagement with the community leaders, custom leaders in the municipality, we go around with the team and first limit the neighborhood by foot, and the GPS will be able to localize and contain the population survey within that perimeters. And then that will allow us that everything that we find within that own community is speaking and really contained by that local community. So we conduct this for 5 communities, and this map shows, like, you know, the number of people that were interviewed and then selected for the studies. For each community, we have 100 of them, 100 households, 100 head of household within the own neighborhood. And the way we selected this neighborhood also, our method of sampling was we take one neighborhood, we jump one, and then we get to another one. We jump one and we get to another one. That means household that was sampled was randomly selected within each communities. Slide. Now, when it comes to now the data collection process, within the data collection process, we had 3 components. We have, the first one was the field work. The second one was the survey that we conducted for collecting economics and social impact data. And then the third component was the results. Within now the subsection A, we had now the sampling strategy, and then we have now the identification of the channels. Because each communities, according to our partners of Emory Universities, the method that they applied in Zambia, for instance, and in China, and in Atlanta, was different. So we had to just have the community themselves identify what are the most channels that are exposed when it comes to fecal contaminations. So now for the economic and social impact data, we have not only conducted focus group, but also we conducted also quantitative survey to collect data regarding socioeconomic status, like incomes, revenues, infrastructure, type of lettering that they have. And then to just give an idea, this is me now conducting a focus group, really collecting data from one of the neighborhoods to really make sure that the data that we get are actually provided and then uptake by the community themselves. This is also me again with my team now conducting focus group with the community. And then this picture also shows now the process of now after we collect the data. We identify 5 channels of transmissions. The first one was the open drain. The second one was drinking water. The third one was the soil. And then the fourth one was also fruits and vegetables. So for each one of those channels that are identified and selected by the community themselves, we conduct sampling strategy every day from 8 to 5. What we do from 8 to 5 is everything that the community is buying when it comes to fruit and vegetables, we buy them during the days, and we have a sample that is collected and then taken to the laboratory, which is conducted by the Institute Pasteur to conduct the studies and detecting really the presence of E. coli. And then the presence of E. coli, when it's now present in one of the samples, that will tell us now if there were fecal contamination, yes or no. And then this is now the different channels that we identify. We have the flooded zone, we have the household, we have the food, we have the surface water, the soil, the municipal waters, which is the drinking water, because in Senegal, water is not being handled by the municipalities, it's now handled by the National Office of Management of Water Services. And then we have public latrine, and then we have open drain. And then in collecting the data, we actually conducted a focus group and survey for the schools, really working with the kids. And these are the kids now putting their heads down, really now answering to our questions. We have the focus group on the upper right. And then we have also now, these are our teams at the pictures at the bottom right, and then left, bottom right, bottom left, really registering the questions, responses from the surveys. And then this is what looks like an open drain in this neighborhood. This is an open drain, and this is now the neighborhood in Dakar. And this is now an open drain. At the pictures at the bottom left is an open drain, really draining the water, and then sewers collected on the fecal just through the neighborhood. This is what looks like also the household at the pictures at the bottom right. Now, when it comes now sampling data, you can look at now for each neighborhood. And each neighborhood, we selected 4 communities. And then for each community, we have hundreds household samples. And then for each community, we have 4 schools samples, which is a total of 500 households, 20 communities, and 20 schools surveys. Now, if you look at now the neighborhood, DTK mean like now Gida Charekau, we have Medina Guna, Rufusques, Sikap Liberté, Wakina. And then for each one of these channels that we identify, whether it's drinking water, open drain water, flood water, food preparation and swap, the produce, the street food, and the soil, we sample each one of them 10, which bring us to a total of 400 samples that we take to the laboratory, to the lab, and analyze them. When it comes to the results, as you may see here for each communities, when it comes to Jide Charika, you can see that the produce contamination is about 87%. You look at Medina Gunas for the produce, it's 96% level of contaminations. The other also cities, you find each one of them 99% contaminations. The surprising thing that we find also was in a city where every household is connected to the sewers, the main sewers installed by owners, even that community is exposed to the produce. Now let's look at the drain water. When you look at the drain water, still this is the 4th row here in the middle is the city where they don't have actually open defecation. They also don't have non-sewer sanitations. All the sewers and households are connected to the main sewer system. But even that, you can see now those open drain, the community are exposed to certain degrees. About 90% of the community are exposed to fecal contaminations. And this is now showed by this open drain that community themselves also have managed to create, draining the fecal from the household to the main open drain system that they have in the community where the community are not being connected to the sewers systems installed by owners. And when it comes to now the produce, you can see now when it comes to the vegetable that we sample, this is how it's exposed on the street. If the soil is contaminated, the open drain is running by the table. These fruits and vegetables also are being contaminated. And then the other thing that we discover is for each community, they have what they call the community gardening. And the community gardening also use the untreated fecal sludge from the open drain to really water the plants, which really now connect back to the fruit that they sell in the market. And then communities are being exposed to it. And even students going to school would buy from this table for the regular snack. And when you look at now the result here that we got, when you look at the drinking water, which is now this upper right left diagram, the community themselves were very worried about testing the drinking water in Senegal because there were arguments going around that, the open drains in these flooded areas are connected now to the sewage, which might contaminate the water. So we conducted a test for the drinking water. We didn't find any contamination so far, which is pretty good news for the Senegalese community in each one of these 5 communities. We didn't have contamination. But when you look at now produce, street food, soil, and open drain water, in open drain water, it's all contaminated. And that's actually the result that we have. And then what we wanted to share, the main result, actually. And then now this table just summarizes the result that we show when it comes now, how many people were connected to sewage, and how many people also didn't have toilet, and how many people shared their toilet, and then why they've been exposed to these different channels when it comes now each communities. And then when you look at now the household that we surveys, this table shows how many people have actually flooded toilet, how many have private toilet, and then how many people are connected to the sewage, and how many people now share their toilets with other members of the household for each communities. And we compare now the result that we got with now the different studies that were conducted around the world. This is now Dakar. And then we compare each one of the channels with other results that we get. We see that here, Dakar is not doing pretty well compared to other countries like Zambia, Kampala, Lusaka, and then Maputo in South Africa. When it comes to now the street food, Dakar is above the mean. When it comes to now the raw produce, Dakar is a little bit below the mean. And then when it comes now, the municipal drinking water, Dakar is doing pretty well. But when it comes now open drain, Dakar is doing pretty bad, as well as for soil. And I think this is the main result that we wanted to summarize. And then this now, when we disaggregate the data, we found that the young girls are more exposed to fecal contamination when it comes to produce than the boys. And now this is now the policy response. After we publish this result, the Ministry of Water and Sanitation in collaboration with municipality have taken action now to implement policy that will really help community to take charge of these own issues by having their own committee to really start now undertaking actions to prevent contamination of the community. And the other thing is now from this result, the Ministry of Water and Sanitation have also enabled IPART to conduct surveillance of water contamination of SARS-CoV-19 in Senegal. And this study is actually ongoing. And the piece that you have here is actually the letter that are published by the Ministry of Water and Sanitation for this work. And that's it.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rebecca Sindall, and I'm the Operations Manager at the WASH R&D Centre at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, South Africa. And today I'm talking about Why Shit Happens, which is the catchier title of a research project called Amplifying Local Voices to Reduce Failures in Fecal Sludge Management, which was funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering. Failure is sometimes glamorized as the mother of invention, and sometimes it's just something that we want to have a good laugh about. This is the greatest toilet scene in any movie released to date. But failures do have serious consequences. We all know that failures can be a waste of money, and they can impact negatively on human life. This is the funeral of Michael Komape, one of 2 primary school children who drowned in South African school toilets in the last 5 years. So while WASH professionals may talk about failures at conference drinks, it's rare that failures show up in presentations. We know that failures are not always benign and that we need to find ways to stop making the same mistakes in the sector. But how do we get people to talk about failures? The WASH Failures team, which consists of myself, Esther Shayler from UNICEF, and Danny Barrington from the University of Western Australia, have used game show style events at international conferences, essentially as elaborate icebreakers to open up the conversation around failures. Off the back of this information that we've gained from various conference audiences, we launched the Nakuru Accord, which was designed to share ways to support accountability within the WASH sector. And if you'd like to have a look at what the Nakuru Accord says, you can put LEEDS, L-E-E-D-S, and Nakuru Accord into Google to go and have a look at that. But frontline workers don't tend to attend international conferences. International conferences are extremely expensive. And if you work for a small NGO, then attending international events is very much seen as a perk of seniority. It's not frontline staff who are attending. Yet those are the people who have a wealth of information and knowledge about what failures happen and how they happen. And so we wanted to look into what information did they have about how failures happen and how we learn from failures in the WASH sector. With seed funding from the Royal Academy of Engineering, we launched a project as a first step to addressing this gap. We identified 108 frontline WASH professionals from 4 countries, Malawi, South Africa, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. And we held open-ended interviews with them, looking at the questions, why do failures happen? How are failures perceived and discussed? And how can we establish an environment where failures are better shared? So I like to look at these 3 questions as essentially, how bad is it? How did we get here? And how do we improve? So starting off with, how bad is it? Why do failures happen? All of these main findings are illustrated with quotes from the interviews with our WASH professionals. And first we'll look at some of the causes of failure. First of all, poor communication and coordination internally to organisations, but even more between organisations, is seen as an issue. And one of our participants, or more than one of our participants, highlighted the divisions that you get between different types of professionals within the sector. One person said, for most engineers, certain things won't make sense. They don't look at where people are. Outsiders come in and assume that there's no sense of organisation in a settlement. But as community engagement professionals, we know that's a lie. And sometimes that communication is lost. There's also a huge amount of politics in WASH, and there is politics at every level, from national governments all the way down to community politics. And at every level, that can be very closely linked to people's ego. There's a huge amount of bureaucracy in large organizations. And this can impact on project planning and the capacity that is built to operate projects Projects often talk about capacity building, but there's often not a deep enough understanding of what capacity is already there, what capacity is missing, and how building that capacity can be done in a useful way. There's a real need for localization of capacity building in the same way that projects need to be localized. An important part of localization is community engagement. And most projects now include community engagement, but there's not always enough community engagement or the right type of community engagement. And again, there are often donor expectations of what a project should run like, and this has an impact on how much time is spent on community engagement. So how did we get here? We found that within organisations, there is often discussion between peers, but the findings and the conversations that are happening about the types of failures that are going wrong are not escalated to higher levels of management or shared with other partner organisations. This is often due to an unequal power dynamic, and those can be power dynamics of all kinds. Particularly with international partners, there is a power imbalance between high-income community participants in that project and local low and middle-income country participants. There is also an assumption that the point of discussing failures is to apportion blame. And so the level of willingness to talk about failures is very closely linked to how happy people are to take that blame. So for small failures, greater discussion, but for large scale failures, people are less willing to talk about those things. There's also an assumption that in a lot of cases, no action will be taken. It's very much an all talk, no action situation. And part of this is linked to funding, particularly for non-governmental or non-profit making organizations. People understand that their jobs are reliant on projects coming in and therefore money coming in. They don't want to talk about failure in case it upsets donors who pay their salaries. So how do we do better? There weren't many answers to this question, and that's not really a surprise. This is something that many people in the WASH sector have been thinking about for a long time, and we've not come up with good answers, so we can't expect anyone else to have good answers. But people do want to be able to talk about failures. There was a view that it is better to see a problem discussed at the table than it is to see it happen in a village. But nobody wants a platform for sharing where they don't feel safe and that doesn't feel user-friendly to them. People want something that is practical, and for most people in frontline situation, that means somewhere where they can talk rather than somewhere where they can write things down. There's also a real lesson to be learned about how language can be adopted and adapted to make the sharing of failures safe. With all of the work that we were doing, the country teams were using language that they thought was appropriate to their location to ensure that people could openly talk about failure. Sometimes this was by things like talking about challenges. Failure has a very cultural aspect and a huge link to people's personalities and egos. And so we need to find a way to make sure that people are happy to talk about that in a language that they are happy with. So these are only the first results from the project, and there will be more to come. Look out for @FSM_fail on Twitter, where we will be sharing more, and a special issue on failures in the Environmental Health Insights Journal. And finally, thanks to all of the team from African countries and beyond who worked so hard to make this project possible. And it's certainly been possible with their hard work, particularly in times of COVID where people couldn't travel. In the words of one of our government interviewees, we hope that as we address failure, we will become one song and speak with one voice. Thank you. If you have any questions or comments about what I have covered in my presentation today, please leave them in the comments section. Please also consider joining one of the live discussion sessions to share your thoughts. You can find a schedule for these sessions on the agendas page.